Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel and spending some time with me today. I always appreciate that. And guys, today I want to talk about misinformation and how so many bass anglers out there have been really misinformed about the realities of bass fishing and the things that bass do. So I've written down 4 or 5 things I sort of want to clarify here to sort of, give you the reason and maybe talk a little bit about how this, misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it, has permeated into people's consciousness as far as how they think bass react and bite to lures. So we're going to get into that in today's video. Also, guys, just want to invite you to please swing by and check out my new page on Tackle Warehouse called Blaukat's Corner. This is something I do every month, and I put the best lures that I think that are going to work for you guys in each month of the year, and I've got a correlating video to each lure that I talk about. You can order those videos on the Tackle Warehouse link I put in there. So if you guys want to check that out, I'll put the link in the description, so I really appreciate that. Okay, guys, misinformation, it affects every part of our life out there. And the thing about people that are misinformed or fall for disinformation is that they think that misinformation is the truth a lot of times. And a lot of times you can't tell them any different, even if you present facts to them to the contrary. A lot of people have a sort of a baked in, belief on certain things and, in every part of our life, but specifically on some things regarding things that bass do or don't do. So we're going to go over that in today's video. So anyway, here's a few of the ones that I think a lot of people, have fell victim to the misinformation. First of all, a lot of people think that, bass are hungry all the time and they bite your lure because they're hungry and they're feeding. And that's not the case, guys. Unless you're fishing at night, when you catch a bass, it's usually not because those fish are hungry. They're opportunistic feeders, but it's been my experience and my theory and the things that I have seen over the course of 50 years that bass feed at night most of the time. The act of feeding, where they're actually cruising, looking for food, is at night. They like the low light conditions to feed in, so they feed a lot at night. So people think that, when they go fishing, it's like, man, the fish are really biting good today, or the fish are really hungry today. That's not the case. That's misinformation, because when you catch a fish, it's usually because of the other instinct that a fish has that have allowed them to survive for over 3 million years on this planet. It's things like curiosity and anger and reflex and variables out there that don't have anything to do with them being hungry. Prime example is like if you run a crankbait next to like a lay down log, and that fish, it doesn't have to, it's not sitting there actively feeding. It's like when that bait comes next to that lay down log, they have to make a split second decision. It's like, am I going to get it or not? It's like, and a lot of times they'll come out and get it out of just a reaction. It's sort of something that's inbred in them. But the act of feeding doesn't usually take place, very often. And most of the time when fish are actively feeding, you're catching them on bottom lures where they're actually looking for those type of fish. Okay, the next one out there is that that bass are affected by cold weather. This is a big source of misinformation too. The fact that the bass's metabolism slows down a lot in cold weather. Now, I'm not going to say this is not true to some extent, but more than not, it's not true. And this is something that I have seen in my own fishing, is bass are not victim to cold weather. They don't slow down in cold weather that much to the extent that people think they do. It was a big myth in fishing for so many years that in the wintertime, it was hard to catch fish. Fish didn't, they're cold-blooded like a turtle or a snake, and they just didn't move around much. That's not the case, guys. I have seen in my own fishing, especially since I've spent more time fishing in the winter, and that, as lures develop to allow us to more effectively fish in cold weather months, bass move fast in the wintertime. I have caught bass on a jerkbait, fishing a jerkbait fast in 40-degree water many, many times. A lot faster than what people would think. It's like a lot of people think with like a jerkbait or cold water, you've got to work it, barely move it, and you got to just barely move that jig to get a fish to hit. But I can't tell you how many times that I've been fishing a jerkbait in the winter time of the year, or even a crankbait sometimes, and the fish just want it faster. They will chase in cold water. So Big sorts of misinformation that fish really slow down, you know, in the wintertime with that. Okay, next one is the myth or misinformation or disinformation that you have to set the hook with force to land a bass and hook a bass. This is not true. Again, this is one of the things that may have been true in the past a little bit, not so much now, because now with the advancements that we have in like fluorocarbon lines and, you know, chemically sharpened hooks and different type of hook diameters and nano coated hooks, you don't have to do that, guys. It's a big myth that you actually have to set the hook. One of the most effective bass catching people I have seen in my life that never loses fish is Gary Yamamoto, who invented the Senko. And if you've ever watched Gary Yamamoto fish one of the soft plastic baits, when he gets a bite, you don't even know it because he doesn't set the hook. He just starts reeling them in and he never loses one. And it seems like to me, and I learned this the hard way because I fell for the myth a long time. I always had this preconceived notion that you got to jack that fish hard and set the hook hard to penetrate the lure in the fish's mouth. That's not the case. Don't fall for that because you don't have to do it. You will land more bass if you just, when you get the strike, if you just start reeling and keep the pressure on. I don't mean just start reeling and let the fish have slack line, but just keep reeling and keep the fish moving towards you. And when you do that, you will constantly penetrate that hook in that fish's mouth as you're reeling, and you won't tear that fish's mouth. You won't force the fish's mouth open. So big piece of misinformation that people, you know, have to set the hook hard with that. Okay, the next one, guys, is that big misinformation people fall through is that cold fronts will shut off bass. Cold fronts do not shut off bass. Bass are not victims of their environment. It's like a lot of people think, well, man, there's a bad front that just went through. That's really going to shut those fish down. They're not going to bite. The only thing that a cold front does as far as bass movement, behavior, and their personality and mood is it makes you require different presentation. It changes their mood and their personality. And that mood and the personality is changed by environmental factors like, you know, the light intensity that's coming down, the wind direction, a temperature drop, barometric fluctuations, but they're still going to bite. It's like those senses that they have that have allowed them to survive on this planet for millions of years as the apex predator in a freshwater lake, that doesn't shut off. So a lot of the times what you have to do after a cold front, you just have to adjust your presentation. Say, for example, before the cold front come through, you were catching them really good on a topwater lure. After that cold front runs through and you know, you lose your low light conditions and you lose your warmer south wind and it's been replaced by, you know, brighter sunshine and colder, wetter temperatures, instead of fishing that topwater, you may have to go to a crankbait or a lipless crankbait or some type of a moving lure that will get a reaction strike. Or maybe you'll have to slow down with like a Ned rig or a shaky head. So don't fall for that misinformation that bass shut down after cold fronts, because it's not true. And finally, guys, the last one is that technology in fishing is a good thing. Technology is ruining fishing in a lot of different ways, specifically electronic technology. Now, technology is not a bad thing. When you're talking about like advancements in, you know, some of our medicines and medical things we have to treat people, or, you know, things like that, or our advancements in, you know, protecting our air and water with technology, that can be a good thing. But technology in relationship to fishing is the biggest source of misinformation out there. It's like when you hear all this advancements in technology, advancements in forward-facing sonar, how it's going to be a great thing for the sport, that is disinformation and that's misinformation and it's a lie. Don't fall for it, because what happens is the further that technology advances in fishing, the further it drives us away from what fishing really is, the intrinsic natural healing value of fishing. Once you remove that from fishing, all you've done is relegated fishing to some commercial activity. You might as well take a gill net and throw it out there over your boat, or you might as well stick a dynamite in there, because fishing at that point becomes nothing more than a venture in finding the fish and catching the fish at the expense of everything else that makes fishing awesome. And a lot of people fall for that misinformation. They fall for the fact that they think, well, technology is good. It's going to help me catch more fish. It's going to make fishing more fun. If you're one of those anglers that feel like that, you're missing out on what fishing is. And you sort of have to retrain your brain, and you have to re-educate yourself into realizing the value of fishing is for us to connect to nature again. We live in a society today, guys, that we're continually being disconnected from nature. You think about it, it's like we wake up in the morning in our air-conditioned or heated houses. We walk out the door on a paved driveway. We get into our air-conditioned or heated cars. We get out of our cars and we walk across pavement into a heated or air-conditioned building or office space. We are disconnected from nature, and that is not good for the human species, because the human species needs that connection to nature in order to survive and thrive. It's something we've had forever. I mean, humans are no different than any other animal on this planet. We've fooled ourselves into thinking we're not, but we still have to fall within those same natures, the same laws of nature. And when you have that and you lose that in fishing, that is when you've lost sight of everything that bass fishing is. So resist technology. The fact that people think technology is a good thing for our sport, it's misinformation, it's disinformation. Don't go for it. I can promise you guys, if you simplify your fishing and you get back to the basics of what fishing really is, it's going to be so much more rewarding and therapeutic for you. You just can't believe it. So anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk later.